So here I can, and I don't need to be on screen. I can just say welcome to everyone. And we're elated to start the early career well, the workshop for early career doctoral students. And that's the EC-AW. And so it's a really great honor to be here today to have our moderator and panelists to talk about the academic ladder. So this will be very exciting. So we have Dr. Ann Gates, who's at the University of Texas at El Paso. We have Dr. Dan Garcia from UC Berkeley and Dr. Russ Joseph from Northwestern University. So I'm happy to turn this over to Dr. Gates to continue with the panel.
Thank you so much, Valerie. It's really a pleasure to be here and to have such a great panelist with us today. Many of you may have heard of Dan Garcia. If you haven't, he's really an outstanding educator coming from the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science Department at UC Berkeley. As Valerie mentioned, he's received numerous prestigious awards. Russ Joseph is an associate professor at Northwestern University, and he's the recipient of the prestigious Career Award. What we have planned for you today is to talk about the different academic career pathways. We'll start with looking at the pathway as a teaching faculty. We'll talk about research faculty, professor of practice, and then what it means to be a tenured track faculty member. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Dan. He will give you further introductions about his career pathway and talking about what it means to come in as a teaching faculty member. And so I'll stop sharing and allow him to share.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anne. And it's such a delight to be on this panel. It's super fun to be able to share some of the stories and some of the career pathways of people who are in my career track. My name is Dan Garcia. I'm a teaching professor, and you might have heard that phrase, professor of the practice, teaching professor. This kind of set a slide deck. Only a few are here to kind of share what that means and how that's mostly a very parallel ladder to the traditional academic research ladder. And I also love questions, so feel free to throw any questions in while I'm doing this. If there's something that I say that's confusing, please correct me and please ask it, and we'll get into that. All right. So this is my colleague and friend Steve Wolfman from University of British Columbia, and he and I had a set of early presentations on this, and this comes from that. And there's a quote I'm going to attribute to him, which is delightful. So this is a beautiful spectrum that talks about different careers you may have heard, different titles you may have heard of faculty, and how much research they have to do in their career and how much teaching they have to do. So if you start, let's go all the way on the left, and I'll end up on the right. So if we go all the way on the left, there's a career track in which you do nothing but research. There's zero teaching. And this is often known as a soft money research position. I actually have a former colleague, former housemate, who does this himself. He works at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and his job every single day is to do research. No teaching. There's no opportunity for teaching. It's not even, if he wanted to, there wouldn't be. He'd have to kind of make an arrangement and make an affiliation with the university. And I say the word soft money because he has to always be on the hustle. He always has to look for the next big grant. And he actually has 5 concurrent grants that support him and his team. It's a big deal, and it's managing your time. And actually, the funny part of it, it's like a lawyer. You know how lawyers say, well, this hour I'm going to bill to that client, and this hour I'm billing to that client. He literally does that. He says, I'm going to put 2 hours in of work, and that's going to be on that grant. And he actually bills that grant for it. It's a really interesting model. He loves research. He loves these 5 projects he works on, and that's the leftmost. Then I'm going to step over here and kind of say the regular. I don't like to say regular. I put it in quotes because I think of myself as having a regular position. But when you look at, I say I'm a professor, this is probably what they're talking about. This is a university or college faculty at R1s, also at R2s, but mostly in my experience is R1s, and in which the numbers we kind of hear are 60% of your time should be spent doing research, 30% doing teaching, and 10% service. So this is where it's like mostly kind of a 60-30 ratio of that. And you're measured, your impact is measured in your graduate students, your grants you've received that help the university, and your papers. That's it. That's really the measure. There's also the teaching you do and the service you do, but really when it's all done, they say, what's your impact? And it's mostly in research. Now we step a little bit to the right, and you've got liberal arts college faculty, and this might be a Swarthmore or Harvey Mudd. There may not even be a graduate program there. And so you're at a university that possibly doesn't have these star R1 grad students to help you. So there is still an expectation you're doing research, but the expectation is a lower number of publications, a lower impact that you're going to have because you don't have the army of people. You are going to be expected to get grants, but you don't have an army of people behind you to support that. I'm going to say I'm over here as a teaching track faculty at an R1. And so my title is teaching professor. It's not a lecturer, it's teaching professor. And I almost like you see the parallel here. This is a 60-30. Well, I'm 30-60. So I'm 30% research or scholarship, some kind of scholarship. And that scholarship, this important thing, the scholarship can either be in the domain. I did my PhD in computer graphics, so I could be publishing in SIGGRAPH, the graphics conferences, or it could be in education. So I actually attend and I'm very active in the special interest group in computer science education. So it's either in the domain, which here is graphics, or in the education part of teaching computer science. And so this is the 30-60 or 60% teaching. I always use my number first. I'm 60 teaching, 30 research, and then 10% service. Then if you step to the right, I also have colleagues who are working also at UC Berkeley, and they are titled instructor or lecturer. And by the way, you can take this role on with only a master's degree, which is really interesting. People don't realize as a senior in high school that one more year of a master's degree, a lot of online programs, a lot of master's programs are 1 year, one more year, and you can get this title of an instructor and be working alongside me at Berkeley. That's amazing for many students. Like, wow, I don't have to go through the six-year path to get a PhD. And so this is also possible to get this job with a PhD. So if you have a PhD, you can, and you want to teach mostly, then it's really these three roles you want. If you don't want the traditional job, every talk, really 15 years ago when I joined this, most of these talks were about this is what everyone does because this is the common thing. And we've kind of added this to make sure people know about these other career paths. Here, these folks are not asked to do any research. So this is 0% research expectation. Their teaching load is much higher, by the way. As you go to the right, there's more higher teaching load, less research expectation. Here, this is 0. If you do some great, maybe you can argue about that, how that dovetails its way into your teaching, but none is expected of you. It's really quite interesting. So Steve now has a quote I'm going to have, and here's another fact here. Generally speaking, it's more common to move to the right over the course of a career, much less common to move to the left. As an example, I know several people in the UC system, University of California system, who started as regular faculty and ended up not getting the grants as much as maybe the expectation was for their role, not having a lot of grad students, and loving teaching. Like, you know what? I love this teaching thing. And they switched over to my title. So they went from professor to teaching professor. And guess what? They didn't lose salary. They just switched over. And now the expectations for promotion were different. They were the same as me, rather than being the same as how many papers have you done, how many grants, how many grad students, okay? Only once do I know my colleague Leo Porter at University of San Diego started as a teaching faculty, was writing like 10, 15 papers a year and said, like, this is what in CS education, this is what I really want to do. And so he's the only case of I know that someone who started here and moved to there. And he had to make a really big case that, look back at my career and would I have passed the bar as a regular faculty? And yes, you did. And they gave him the job, and it's pretty cool. So it's almost like it's a little easier to move this way than it is to that way, because the expectations are super high for the number of publications and grants. And this is Steve's quote. I want to just try to add this here. He says, when I'm teaching, I often don't read the slides, but I'll read this one because it's such a good quote. When I'm teaching, I'm often nervous, frustrated, or worried, but almost always enthusiastic and excited as well. When things go well, I'm exhilarated. When I'm doing research, I'm often nervous, frustrated, or worried, occasionally obsessive, and rarely particularly enthusiastic or excited. When things go well, I'm relieved. Now, Steve publishes, Steve still publishes, still teaches activity, but this is why he said, my career really is about teaching, less about research. I want to have that good, positive feeling. And I certainly resonate with this. And this is one of the reasons I chose this role as well. So in terms of teaching, by the way, I'm happy to take any more questions. That was my first slide. There's only 3 or 4 slides here. So I mentioned that this all the way on the right, this instructor lecturer position are always options. Now, this is important. Depending on the school, because you often only need a master's for them, some folks say, you know what, they're viewed a little bit as second class. No one will say that, but there's a kind of a feeling in the air that their offices are not with other faculty offices. They're often not listed on the webpage as like faculty and as teaching professors and professors, but then lecturers are a different category, often because they don't carry the full benefits of security of employment or tenure. Sometimes these positions don't offer tenure. They don't have sabbatical even. They're just, you're in job to be on the ground to get the teaching done and do that. Now, here's another piece of it. There's a lot of schools that have a teaching need, and they'll often open, we do as well, Berkeley. We'll have, you know what, we lost somebody. We don't want anybody to cover AI this year because we had 3 faculty who normally do it, and 2 are on leave, industry leave, because the AI money is so hot right now. And one of them just got pregnant, and so they're taking a parental leave. We have nobody to cover this course, so we'll open up and say we actually have a running lecturer pool, which are a lot of times it's our former graduate students who often have taught that course themselves. So we'll pull somebody in and they'll get hired into that title. It's called Unit 18 in the UC system for that 1-year position. That also means there's an opportunity for people who actually would have a lot of flexibility to move around and take these 1-year positions. So you could actually, that's a great career, but a lot of times in the military, you have to move every 2 years. It's not unheard of that someone will move around and basically take these 1-year positions and kind of get to live around places all around the world and all around the country. So that's exciting. Many top tier schools, many top R1s now have teaching track faculty positions. That wasn't true 20 years ago when I started. I've been doing this 25 years. I've been at Berkeley 35. I've been teaching in this role for 25 years. But so when I started, there were only like a handful, Duke and Berkeley and Stanford and UW, and really far, far few. Now it's like everybody feels like they have teaching track faculty positions. It's so exciting to see such a growing part of our community. And these roles, the ones that are teaching faculty, not lecturers, and I'm talking about the teaching faculty positions that are not the lecture positions. Again, higher status and greater job security. I have tenure. That's exciting to have that. It's not true for all teaching professors. I'd love to wave a magic wand and have every university offer tenure for these roles. Not all of them do. It's really a shame. And I often, when I can, try to advocate for those universities to do that. If you're a gifted teacher and you want to focus on classes without research expectations, this national visibility is important. So you can actually find, at an MIT or at a Berkeley, there are professors of practice that come in different names. I'll talk about it in the next slide. Professor of the practice, teaching professor, teaching stream. These are all names for the same thing. And many of us love our title and don't want to give to them. So I'd rather not be called professor, teaching stream. Call me teaching professor. I really like that phrasing. Some people say professor of teaching. Okay, I'll take it. But the point is, these are all titles that mean the same thing. And for the most part, not always, but for the most part, we teach the intro courses. For the most part, our teaching ratings are higher than research faculty. Again, if I'm 60-30, I better be a better teacher than the average research faculty. So they throw me into it. They don't throw me, but they incentivize, at Berkeley at least, for folks to teach the intro courses where you get more quote unquote teaching credit because you have more students, more impact. And so my teaching credit isn't just, one course. It is the number of enrollment, and the enrollment in intro courses is larger than the upper division smaller courses, even though there was been huge rise in these sizes. So there's kind of an incentive structure like for economics pushing me into the lower division. And so we love that. I actually love doing that. I love being the person who introduces computer science to the next generation of kids and tries to get them all excited about it. So it's super, super fun. And there's also opportunities to kind of be engaged with the undergraduate curriculum. They want us to be, associate dean of undergraduate affairs to be able to guide that. So they used to have a title at Berkeley. There was, remember I mentioned lecturer. The phrase just lecturer means non-research, no research at all, just an instructor. They added these suffixes called security of employment to indicate that, and this was my title before they switched over at the UC system. I used to be called lecturer PSOE which when I was kind of the assistant before tenure. Then I became SOE when I received tenure. SOE stands for security of employment. Got to get it like tenure. And P stands for pre. And then I became senior lecturer SOE when I was full professor. And so this is a parallel kind of process that you've heard of assistant, associate, and full. And tenure happens about 6 years, and senior or full happens at about 12 or 13 or 14, depending on your pace. And what's advancement based on? Teaching, curriculum development, service. As I mentioned, it's a 60-30-10 rule with teaching, curriculum development kind of together. Show me how you've been an innovator. Show me how what you've done is there. Show me your scholarship. Show me your visibility in the CSH community. See this. Show me how the things you're building in your teaching and your curriculum development are being shared more globally. Don't just keep it local. Show me how you're having impact outside of the walls of the institution. Now, here's the key. People won't tell you this. There are more research faculty on the review committee and the promotion and tenure committee than there are teaching. So they don't even know. They might not even know how to do this. So a lot of times for new universities that are adding these roles, the people looking at you don't know how to evaluate you. And you're often evaluated with the wrong lens. It's like the wrong rubric when you look at a paper. So they often have one lens you use. So it doesn't hurt if you've had a couple of impactful scholarship papers that, oh, okay, they've written some stuff. If that's what they're looking for, because again, that's all they really usually look for. I would say always really, but they're often looking for papers in there. So how to get started in this role? This is an exciting role. I love it. I'm happy to mentor and help anybody on this call who wants to jump to this. Teach as much as you can in grad school. Sometimes they let grads teach fall and spring, actually teach, not just co-teach like a head TA, but actually there's often possibilities to actually be an instructor. Remember I said sometimes somebody leaves the AI and they need to fill that hole. So if you raise your hand and say, I'd love to fill the hole, you can be interviewed and actually given a temporary Unit 18 lecturer position. So sometimes they'll actually have a grad student cover that course. You're probably an expert in that. You're an AI grad student, so they'll typically not grab somebody from a different subfield of CS to pull them in. But if you're the AI person, you've been the head TA or the TA for this class for a couple of semesters, you're ready to step in if you're a grad student into that role if they need a hole. Sometimes summer roles. I'm at Berkeley. I coordinate the summer teaching, and so there are opportunities for summer teaching, which is great. So grab those if you can. Super exciting. Sometimes we at Berkeley and UW and other places have these roles, and we often even will look externally to people. So there's ways to get added to our temporary lecturer pool to be able to pull you into that summer opportunity. Okay. I talked also about these visiting one-year appointments. There's a new movement to include teaching-based postdocs. We'll get to that in a second, but there's another possibility kind of to do that after you graduate. There's a conference called SIGC, Special Interest Group, Computer Science Education. TS stands for the Technical Symposium. It's the big flagship conference for CS education. It's like the big, it's like the single, it's the SIGGRAPH, or it's the Parallel Computing Conference that happens in the fall. So there is often one big flagship conference where everybody comes to. Maybe it's AAAI, whatever that is. So go to that if you're interested in this path and be introduced to the community and try to know as many people there. It's really warm and fuzzy. We're so friendly. It's a delightful thing. They're often teaching faculty birds of feather. So at this conference, there's a teaching faculty birds of feather, which is exactly a place for new grad students who are just there for the first time to get to know us all. And many of the veterans like myself will sit there and share what we know with new young people. It's great. Again, learn and network. Make sure powerful people know your name as you're starting to attend this conference. Make sure people who are like on the stage a lot and leads of the conference, make sure they know your name for good reasons. Make sure that you're doing some getting active. Maybe have a poster that's really attractive. Maybe you're writing your own birds of a feather or demo or lightning talk. You're doing some things lighter weight, not necessarily the paper is the big one, but there are a lot of other opportunities at this conference to get some visibility, to volunteer for roles. I did some of that early. Also, if you're ever sitting next to a senior person and you're there in a circle talking, you kind of walk up to the circle, make sure the senior person introduces you so that you get to know and write them all down. So you get to know, oh, hi, nice to meet you, Mary, Susan, Nick. Make sure you know everybody on that circle, which is nice. Join the relevant mailing list. If you join SIGC, so you join ACM, I encourage you to join ACM, Association of Community Machinery, and join SIGC. There are two different things you have to join. If you join the SIGC, you get part of our mailing list. And so there's a 60 email list that you get, and you can kind of see, oh, you're part of the community by just listening. And you probably be lurking for the first N years or N months, but feel free to contribute when you have a question for the community. There's also a teaching track Piazza list. It's kind of an informal group. And there's also a Google Doc of like, where are you? And there's some Google Docs of all the other roles that are teaching faculty all around the country. And you can look at that as well. And this worked great for me. So this is a path. And I think that's my last slide. Thank you so much, and happy to take any questions offline as I pass it back to Ann and pass it back to everyone else. Thanks so much.
That's really great. Thanks. Thank you so much. And so, great introduction and great hints. And, please really listen to all of the um, advice that Dan gave you, because I think it's exactly right what you need to be doing. You need to be doing your research as well. He mentioned that research faculty at national labs, but there are also research faculty are being hired at a lot of universities. And I think that what you have to really look at, as Dan talked about, is what is the pathway? Is there a pathway to tenure or permanency of being hired and staying at that university? As a research faculty member at our university, you can ask to teach a course. And so it's a way for you to be able to learn who the students are and to bring them into the research lab. But as Dan mentioned, the focus is on research and bringing in the funding. And so that's really an important piece as a research faculty. A professor of practice is something that we have at our university. And this is where you get hired by virtue of your professional experience. And so if you're a software engineer, you've been in an industry for a long time, you can come in as a professor of practice. And so typically what we did at the University of Texas at El Paso, where I'm at, is that we created career pathways so that faculty can move from assistant associate to full. And you don't have, as they do at Berkeley, which I think is wonderful, where you have this truly tenured position. Ours is guaranteed for almost up to 3 years is what you get, but it's always renewed after that time. So what I want to do now is move into a traditional pathway to elaborate a little bit more on what Dan talked about on the tenure track, tenure pathway. And so typically what precedes this is becoming a postdoc. And this is an option that you have. I'm going to turn it over to our panel and ask Russ first about what it means to become a postdoc. I mean, is this a good position to go after? Russ, what are your opinion on that?
Okay. Yes. So I think depending on your circumstance, postdoc could be a good option. In some areas, postdocs are actually kind of required to do, but not all. So what I would say kind of in general, if I could share my screen here, I can say a little bit more.
I need to stop sharing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so in general, what's a postdoc? So a postdoc is a temporary research position, which you typically hold after completing your PhD. And as I said, for some areas, it's basically essentially required or strongly expected. So in particular, in theory, I believe, for a lot of theoretical computer scientists, it's generally expected that you do a postdoc before you get a faculty position. But that's not true for all areas. And what are you doing during your postdoc? So typically what you're doing is you're focused on research essentially 100% of the time. And you're working with the faculty who is your mentor or your postdoc advisor. And generally speaking, you're working in their research group. And often people that have postdocs actually have large groups. So you are actually kind of running part of their lab entirely and working with grad students in the lab. And generally speaking, you're working on some important project. And while you're there, you are basically kind of functioning as a mini version of a faculty member, at least with regard to research. Right. So you're running the labs, you are working with the students, usually directly, you're writing grants, you're writing papers. And why would you do a postdoc? Typically, you do a postdoc if it's either required for the area that you're in, or if you want to build up your CV so you can get ready to go on a faculty search in a year or two. And why does that matter? Well, because the things you're doing as a postdoc, right, is you're writing proposals and you're publishing papers, right? And you're focused on that 100% of the time. And those are things that you're going to need to have on your CV to get competitive faculty positions. So it's a great opportunity to focus on that and kind of build up things. It's also a good way to get some more practical experience kind of managing groups or managing a research group, and you can get experience like what it is like to run a lab and sort of, be in charge and supervising PhD students. And that's, again, something you're going to be doing as a faculty member. So it's good practice. It's also a good opportunity to kind of work with someone who's an expert in one particular area and sort of broaden your expertise or broaden your background or pick up some new skills. So generally speaking, postdocs are short-term. 2 years is pretty common, but it can range from 2 to like maybe 5 years or longer. But generally speaking, you want to have a plan and sort of an exit strategy. All right. So you're going into the postdoc and your thought is, okay, well, my plan is to push hard on this for 2 years, and then I'm going to go out on the job market again for a faculty position. And if those are things that kind of align with your kind of career vision and where you want to be, a few years down the road, then a postdoc could be a good option for you. They can also, the other ways that a postdoc is, kind of helpful is kind of sometimes if you do go out on the job market and you don't land something, sometimes a postdoc is a kind of fallback that you can arrange. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'll start sharing back. You can. So, so one of the things that I wanted to also mention is I'm very much like Dan. I like doing research, but I really wanted to teach. That was very important to me. And so as a postdoc, I think it's important that you do have that experience teaching. And again, it depends on the position and what you're hired for. Many times you're hired off of a grant, as Russ said. And so you're expected to contribute to that research. But I think that being able to balance it is important. I'd like Dan to elaborate a little bit more when he talked about teaching-based postdocs. That's something new. I really haven't heard about that. So Dan, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I actually wanted to start with a couple of thoughts on Russ. By the way, for really, really nice coverage, Russ, of what a postdoc is. There's a couple of things I wanted to add in addition. One, postdocs often don't get paid very well. So if you actually think about how much salary you're going to get as a first-year assistant professor versus a postdoc is like half of that. It's not even close to what it is. And so you kind of need to know that as you're thinking about your family or what you need to do to kind of support things. That's one. Two, there's some feeling among some people that if postdocs aren't the norm in your field, and Russ mentioned theory, sometimes when I listen to the faculty and on hiring discussions to hire new assistant professors, they'll ask the question, what's their home run? And so what's their home run says you don't get a faculty job at a top school if you have a lot of singles. This is a baseball analogy, so apologies to those who don't know baseball. But in baseball, there's a home run where you score one big run, or you can just get to first base, which is like a quarter of that. So you don't get a faculty job with a lot of singles, a lot of small papers that don't really move the needle there. But if you have one home run, so they always say, what's their home run? That's a very common analogy people draw from when they talk about hiring new faculty. So if you haven't yet hit your home run, and it's going to be expected by the people looking at your case, then boom, that's a perfect opportunity for a postdoc to give a little more time to just finish that idea, finish that paper, finish that piece of software that might have some impact. And boom, that impact is what people are going to use to measure you. The other interesting thing is sometimes, again, this is 25 years I've been on the other side of the hiring decision. Sometimes you'll apply to a school, okay? You apply to a school and you don't get chosen because for whatever reason, you don't get chosen. Maybe it's a competitive year. Maybe there's some superstar that, beat you out for that role. But people will say, can we offer the person a postdoc? And so you kind of want to go to school X, and school X didn't say yes, but they actually said maybe. And there's a postdoc opportunity because they like you, they like your case, they think you're amazing. We just don't have the slot to give to you. So they'll offer you a postdoc to jump into that role. And that's an opportunity for you to stay. So here's a cool thing. This is also a fun thing. You then can stay at the place you wanted to be anyway. You get to make those relationships. Now you're in these meetings, and now you're having lunch, and now you're it's not like it's obsequious and it's unctuous. It's not like you're slimy, but you're kind of making relationships. You're making these great, solid networking relationships with the place you want to be. And guess what happens? 2 years later, you write a paper that has a home run. They say, wow, look at this person. They really are amazing. And now there's a role for you and you get a job. So I've seen a lot of people get to Berkeley by being a postdoc for a couple of years. They may or may not have failed the job attempt the first time, but they're a postdoc a couple of years. We've hired a lot of postdocs here. So that's a nice way to do that. The third option is you stay a postdoc at your university. So as I said, the two postdocs are you either want to get to school X, you apply, and then they offer you a postdoc. You get to be there anyway, but not in the perfect role. The second is you actually stay where you are. You already have some roots settled down. You do a postdoc, you kind of grow your stuff, and you kind of stay with people you know, and then you launch from there. So postdocs often are either at the place you wanted to be or the place you already are. So those are the things that I kind of just wanted to add as some nuance and some color to what the amazing summary that Russ shared. In terms of teaching postdocs, they are super rare. And I say that as one of the senior teaching professors of our community. And we continue when we get together and talk, we say, you know what, we should create a teaching. We keep saying we should create a teaching postdoc. So there are lots of people who want to build one of these roles because they see how successful postdocs are on the research side, but they're not very common. What is more common, and it's not really technically a postdoc, is get these one-year lecture positions. And if you really want a teaching faculty position, it's almost like the same thing. It's not a role where you're going to be able to build up your scholarship because you're not expected to do any research, but maybe you're only given one course. Normally a lecturer is given 3 courses, sometimes 4 or 5 at some universities for a lecture, but maybe you're hired. Again, the salary is going to be less because if this full-time lecturer is normally teaches 3 courses and you're only teaching 1 as a kind of a stub, as a filler, then you're not going to get that high salary. And maybe if you can make it work, that's great. But because you have this extra time, you can use it almost like a teaching postdoc. So a lot of people are using these lecture positions to kind of pay the bills, but then you're using it in lieu of a teaching postdoc, which doesn't exist. But again, now you're doing the same thing where you're moving around, you're getting to know the teaching faculty, they're getting to know you. Wow, this person's amazing. Boom, the next time a teaching professor opportunity rolls up, they know you. They're like, hey, this person is here. Let's make sure that case bubbles to the top of the chain of the people we're looking at. So I think teaching postdocs, I would love to see more of them. I'd love to see more of them officially done. But there is, if absent that, there is an opportunity to leverage these one-year lecturers almost like a teaching postdoc, where you can do that and still be able to have some teaching while you're doing that.
Thanks so much, Dan. I think the takeaways here, and I want to encourage all of you that are participating today, is you really have to have a plan of where you want to be. And that's what I'm taking away from what Dan is saying, is that look at those opportunities that will get you there, right? How are you going to build a portfolio that will get you into the job that you want? And so always be thinking about that. Think about the universities that you're applying to. If it's a university or a national lab, think about where you want to be and what the context for that place that you're applying to. What is the context? As an assistant professor, you have to understand what the expectations are for you to move from an assistant to an associate professor with tenure. So the process starts at year 5 as an assistant professor. And then it's normally takes a couple of years before the decision is made. But when you go to the university, you have to understand what is the mission of the university? What is it going to take for you to get tenure? So is teaching important? I think at our university, we will not tenure faculty that are not good teachers. We want them to be excellent teachers, of course, but teaching is very important because that's what we value at our university. Other universities, it may be more about the research. So you need to really understand that. You have to really provide clear evidence that you are have the competence to teach, and that you really have to have a clear history of significant contributions to the advancement of knowledge in your discipline. And when to go through tenure, and there'll be other workshops that you'll be attending, I hope, through Command-IT, through CASI, what is that whole process of seeking tenure? Because there is a number of things that you have to be considering that we are not going to go into today. To go to an associate professor, this is really now with tenure, there's a lifetime appointment. Now, I want to say that you can come in as an associate professor without tenure. Let's say you're moving from one university to another, from a national lab to a university. So you can come in without tenure. We're in the process of doing that actually right now with one applicant. But you still have to now meet, when you're coming in as associate, typically it's because you have the research record. Maybe you don't have the teaching record. It might be vice versa, depending on the university. But when you want to, when you're at an associate professor level, now you want to move to full professor, typically that takes 5 to 7 years. I had a very short time between associate and full because I was asked to take a leadership role, and I negotiated the ability to move to full a little bit early, and I had the record to be able to do that. But at that point, you're really trying to show that you're making the contributions that you will be productive for the life that you will have as a professor. You do not want to bring people in that will be sitting on their records and not moving forward at the university. We really are looking more for leadership in the field, whether it's at the national, should be at the national level, but also at the international level. The pathway after full is going into an administrative position. Now, there are many associate professors that move into a position as chair. It's something that I would not advise because being an administrator is a big task. There's a lot of duties that are associated with that take you away from doing the research, doing the building that record to become full. Once you're full, I mean, you can go into dean's position, provost position, president's position. But again, this is going back to what Dan is advising you to do. If that is your career path, then you need to be going to those seminars, going to those special opportunities that prepare you to become a dean, that prepare you to become a leader, provost. So there are a lot of opportunities that will get you there, but you really have to be planning for that effort. You can also be seeking the role of distinguished professor. This is where you are given accolades for the work that you've done. Typically that comes with additional funds that are unrestricted that you can use as you wish. So I'll stop there for a minute before we turn it over to Russ so that he can describe his career pathway. Are there any questions from the participants?
I'll just plug in that if you're interested and you get to that level, this is some years from now, there's this early career is a new initiative. Anne and Russ and I have been involved in the academic career workshop, the one that has existed for many, many more years, that Command-IT runs. And there are sessions on moving to administrative roles. I think that, Anne, you lead actually. So please attend that and you can hear those stories.
These are really important. I mean, I think that as Dan said, it really, you need to have those mentors. So mentors, coaches. Dan talks about, having the advocates, the people, when he talked about meeting the people that have a career that you aspire to have, getting to know them, because then they will introduce you to others within the field. And to get tenure, whether it's going to associate or going to full, you really need, letters from the community that will talk about your contributions to the field. Both through publications, but also through your work in conferences. and journals and so forth. So I really, it's important to have people that will advocate for you, that will be a coach for you. Really critical to move to that next level. So Russ, hand it over to you now.
Okay, thanks. I just want to what Ann said just now about having people that can be advocates for you is so very important. You will need mentors, you will need advocates throughout the entire process. Much more probably than you initially think, right? Because I think a lot of us are like, oh, I'm like a hot shot, or whatever, or I can do it on my own, but you probably need more help than you realize. So heads up. Okay. And then I think we'll talk. This will come back. Again, Anne mentioned letter writers, and this will come back up in a second. But all right. All right. So let me share. All right. I'll tell you a little bit about my career path. Okay. So, all right. So my name is Russ Joseph. I'm originally from St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. So growing up, I was always, I loved computers, and I was, fairly certain that that's what I wanted to do. So when it came time to go to college, I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. I kind of jumped right in. I ended up double majoring in ECE and CS at CMU. And I was having a blast. During my junior year, I took so I had the benefit of getting to meet some, as a freshman, a couple of older kind of upperclassmen in through my fraternity who were, ECE and CS majors, and they were like, "Oh, you need to take this class when you're a junior. You need to take this class when you're a senior. It's awesome." And basically, taking their advice, I just kind of planned out my courses so I would be able to do some of those. And one of those courses I was able to take was a superscalar processor design class by John Shen, and that blew me away. That was awesome, and I was like, "This is what I want to do." And so I applied to grad school. I got into Princeton, and that was a very happy circumstance because my fiance got a job offer nearby in Johnson & Johnson. And so that worked out perfectly for us. So I went to Princeton and she went to work at J&J. We eventually got married. And oh, by the way, this will be 25 years married next week. So
Wow.
that worked out pretty well.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Great.
Okay. So I went to Princeton. I worked with Margaret Martinosi. And so as we were just talking about having kind of good mentors and advocates, she is great. She was a great mentor and remains a great mentor today, and been a great advocate for me and helped me make connections and kind of just grow. And so I'm so grateful. And kind of along the way, kind of at CMU and at Princeton, I did internships like basically almost every summer. And that was good experience. But then I knew that I wanted to be an academic. So I applied a bunch of different places, and I got an offer to come to Northwestern, and I've been here now for 20 years. So my research area is computer architecture. I do power and reliability aware systems. I've had a lot of service roles at the university and sort of in the research community. I've been the curriculum chair for the computer engineering program for almost 13 years or something. I just stepped away from it last year. I took a sabbatical last year for the first time in, like I said, 20 years. And I'm using this to kind of change research directions a little bit. And I'm going to kind of jump back in September. So other things I do. So I mentioned I've been married for 25 years almost. We have two girls who are 14 and 11. And the other thing I do when I'm not being a professor and being a dad is I run like a marathoner. I run 17 marathons in 17 states. I originally started out just doing one a year. But because I started in my late 30s, I realized I was not going to get to all 50 states if I just kept at that pace. So this year I did 5, or planning to do 5. Did 3 already in the spring, and hopefully I can do 2 more in the fall. And then I'll be in, I think I can get to all 50, hopefully. All right, so that's a little bit about my career path and background.
Well, thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about reviews. So what is this importance of annual reviews? Russ, I don't know at what point you'll be moving toward a full. Sounds like it'll be soon.
Yeah.
But tell me about reviews, the importance of that. There's a 3rd-year review, of course, there's annual reviews. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So annual reviews are pretty common at most universities. I can tell you a little bit about how things work at my university. So generally speaking, all faculty at my university are reviewed annually, and this review happens essentially at the college level, so the dean's level. And then there's some infrastructure at the dean's level, and then you have a discussion with your department chair. But what happens is they take a look at all of your faculty activities. So that's research, teaching, and service. And these are all things that they evaluate as part of your promotion and for raises and other things as well. So the way it works at my university, at least, is there's a web portal. You go on, you log on to the web portal, and they basically, there's some time of year, it's typically at the end of the fall, which is kind of annoying because this is when people are kind of wrapping up things in the fall, and then they're pestering us to do this. But anyway, it's a gripe of mine. It seems like there are better times to ask for this, but anyway. So you go on and you list your major accomplishments, describe your career objectives, your goals, short-term and long-term, and you upload a CV. And then the university compiles a list of all of the activities that are visible. So they grab all of your publications from that year, this past year, all of your grants, they have a record of that. They have a record of all the grants proposals you've submitted through the university and all the grants that you received. They can total up all the dollars. They pull together all of your teaching evaluations from the online course evaluations. They have a list of all of the students you've advised and everything. So they basically compile all of that, and then you can review it and say, oh, you missed this paper here, or you missed this grant, or this grant is just coming in here, it's not listed there. So there's an opportunity for you to kind of correct things that are not quite right. And then they go and they take it and they look at that, and that's used in decisions about salary. And it also, so that's a kind of direct, kind of pretty immediate impact, because you'll see that in a few months' time when you go and you talk to your chair about the your annual review. They'll and the other thing is that it's useful in getting some feedback, because it's periodic, right? It's every year. So you can get, hey, this is something you need to improve on, or you did a great job here, but we'd like you to kind of work a little bit more on this. So it's a good opportunity for you to get some feedback with your, consultation with your department chair. And it's kind of a formal mechanism, because it's basically, if it's instituted by university annually and everyone has to do it, there's sort of less of a chance that things fall through the cracks. At least that's the hope.
Yeah, and so how do you think people should handle if they're given maybe what's perceived as negative? So I always look at, as an administrator, I always look at reviews as providing constructive, right? It should be constructive on how to improve, but some people will look at that because you have external people now looking at your reviews when you go up for promotion, may interpret some things and grab onto that and see it as a negative. What advice would you give on how to handle those kinds of comments that are constructive but are really talking about ways to improve? Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, I mean, what I would say sometimes is you kind of have to develop a bit of a thicker skin, possibly than maybe you would like. And if these comments really are genuinely coming from a place of where the person is trying to help you, you really have to kind of take it all in. Maybe what I would do is I would recommend kind of put it down, step away, take a deep breath, and come back and try to look at it with kind of fresh eyes.
Right.
And try to think about, this is an opportunity for you to improve. And sometimes when you're looking at sort of, for example, numbers from a course evaluation, they can be kind of, and some of the comments, sometimes they can be kind of harsh. Take them with a grain of salt, but if you're honest with yourself, there are probably things that you can improve, or there are probably things you can learn from.
Right. And I think it's really important to, as you said, to take them to heart and make changes, but you have to document that as well. You really have to show what you have done with whatever suggestions that have been given to you, and how you've addressed them, right? Dan, can you talk a little bit about this as well?
I'm happy to share. So at Berkeley, you get reviewed every 3 years. I actually wanted to ask Russ a question. Do you get reviewed? Do you get promotions every year then? Does your salary bump up?
No. Okay. Yeah. So this is annual for everyone.
Right.
And this is part of your annual kind of salary pay raise adjustment. It's take, I don't know. It's the justification for whatever pay raise happens or doesn't happen.
I see.
Officially.
Okay. Right. So every year that happens, right.
And that's separate from the kind of promotion process.
So
it's used in the promotion
from the promotion process.
Yeah. So some of the information that's collected here can be used in the promotion process, but it's
but you might get a pay bump every year, just to make sure I'm clear. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. But promotion, you mean promotion to the next title?
Yeah, promotion to the next title. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So what's interesting about, and again, all I know is Berkeley. I have a slide for my background, if that's useful, and to kind of share that story. If I can weave that into my answer, I'm happy to share that. But to the point of annual reviews. So I've been at Berkeley for 25 years. My path is very linear. A lot of people have a circuitous path. I have a very linear path. I fell in love with CS. I went to MIT, was there for 5 years, got a major in CS and EE. You can get two, even though basically it's the same degree, but I took some extra courses to get a EE degree because I love digital electronics. So I got the EE degree and hated analog, but I love the digital part. And then went to Berkeley as a grad student, was there for 10 years, taught a lot, I think somebody told me I taught the most in Berkeley history, and nobody's ever taught 16 courses as a grad student. That's a lot. And fell in love with teaching. And at some point when now I'm applying to the faculty position, everyone knows me because I'm the guy that teaches all these courses. So it was a little bit unfair for the other people. That's like, He's the guy that's the teacher guy. So I've been at Berkeley 25 years. So I've been at Berkeley 35 total years. It's a very linear path, and I just always fell in love with CS. Then I fell in love with teaching, and that's where I am. So it's a kind of a nice thing. I have a couple of slides for my research I do. I'm happy to share as well. But to the point of annual reviews, I only know Berkeley, right? I've only been there 35 years. But so I don't know really of other things. I've been on these panels before, and I've also been in the room when the panels have happened. And every year they say the value of these annual reviews to kind of know where you are. We only get evaluated every 3 years. It's a lot of work to put together your 3 years. So it takes me almost a full week in the summer to put together my whole story and every talk I've given over 3 years to do this. So it's like the same work that you all doing every year. I'm doing every 3 years. I consider it like useful to put it all together in one place to update my CV. So my CV only updates every 3 years. Everybody else's CV updates every year. My CV is like dated for, it's like frozen. And then 3 years later, a big bump, and 3 years later is a big bump. So what's interesting is I don't think that's not productive time. I'm not writing papers. I'm not teaching. I'm not doing it. It's just like work. It's just like the tax you have to do in this role. Now, it's useful to kind of put a story and a narrative and kind of talk about it for other people so that you can have a consistent story. But what's interesting is I actually like that. I'd rather not be doing this work every year. I like the fact that I only have to kind of dig in and do this, be taxed every 3 years. And I would hope that my salary jumps up a lot to accompany, to kind of match whatever that does. The other nice thing about having that, whenever you have averaging over 3 years, you can have a high and then a low year and then a high year again, but it averages, but the 3 year story is still strong. Rather than like every year, if you always got to be delivering, you might not get a lot of papers accepted or might not do well in your teaching evaluations 1 year. But if over a 3 year period, it's strong enough, you can make a story. So I actually really, it's a funny, I'm the naysayer, if I will, on this. I actually I prefer people don't look at me. Let me do my thing for 3 years, and I'll talk to you in 3 years after I have done my stuff. Now, again, I could go off on the wrong path. Like, let's say month 1 of that, I do the wrong thing. I'm getting no feedback that that's the wrong thing. Obviously, I could externally ask my mentors, hey, here's my new thing, my new research direction I want to go to. I plan to teach backwards and face away from the students. How about that? No, that's not such a good idea, Dan. Face the student. Look at I plan to yell at them when they get it wrong. No, that's such a good idea that we need to. So, you could decide to do the wrong thing for 3 years and need to be corrected, but no one's going to correct you because it's not formally part of the process. But again, I feel like that tax of burning a week in the summer to put my package together, I'd rather do that once every 3 years than once every year.
Well, what I like about what Russ said in their system is that they pull in a lot of the information automatically for you.
Yeah.
But at our university, we do annual reviews as well.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's just a really big burden.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of every 3 years. I think it's probably more common to do it on an annual basis. I do want to emphasize to our participants the importance of really creating communication line with your whoever is evaluating you, right? If it's your chair, if it's the head of a division or whatever, you really need to have those touch points. And you need to, because we're always going to get some feedback on how to do better. If we're not, then I think something's wrong, right? Because we can always pivot and do other things. I think it's really important to address those directly, as I said, when you have an opportunity, but it's continuous, and continuous education is so important to be attending, going to 6C, as you mentioned. If you're, I think whether you're a researcher or not, going to 6C or an education conference is super important. Always going to any kind of conferences that are in your area of research, very important. You have to show that you are involved in continuing to learn from others. So I'm going to.
I just want to add one thing, if I can't add to that, which is that's excellent. Definitely make sure that your chair knows what you're doing, that you're having conversations, partly because at least the process at Berkeley, it's a twofold process. You put your package together, then your chair reads it and writes a letter. And there might even be a committee that's assigned to look at the letter and writes a summary of this. So they kind of summarize this. Usually the chair signs it. So this is the chair summary that does this. But here's the catch. Then, and by the way, you can then push back and say, I disagree with that conclusion. And then so there's an opportunity kind of legally for you to get in to say, like, I actually want to write a response to that the way they've characterized X or Y is not appropriate, or they missed this paper, or for me, they counted some of my, because teaching, research, and service are so intertwined for me.
Yeah.
They had like counted something that I was counting as scholarship, as teaching, and I said, no, this is CS Ed publications. It's actually in. So I
Yes.
argued back and pushed, because they said they give you, for us, they give like high, low, medium for each of teaching, reaching, and service, and I wasn't getting high, which I had gotten before. He was cutting me high, medium. I was like, I think you're counting these things in the wrong category. So it's like super high and medium. No, I want high. So I pushed back and they said, oh, yeah, actually, you're right. And so they recat. So it's nice to be able to push back on that. That's part one. But then,
go ahead.
Then your package gets thrown over the fence and it's looked at by the promotion and tenure committee that you don't know and you shouldn't know. So there's a little bit of like, as much as you want to make a relationship with people who are evaluating you, it's a cleaner process when you don't know. It's like the double blind review. You don't know who's on the other side of that looking at your paper. I don't know who's on the budget committee making the decision about that. And I think it's a good thing that I can't influence or try to take out for lunch. So there's a little bit of like the clean process is the promotion tenure folks at the, might be the dean level. You obviously know your dean, but then there's a committee that's there. And yes, the promotion tenure committee is listed publicly, but you're not supposed to know who they are. They look at your stuff and have a more objective perspective of it when they're looking at you compared to other people. So there's a little bit of like, here's CS, but now we're looking at all teaching faculty, and for my kid, all the teaching faculty across the university. How are you doing across that? Oh, wow, look. And CS, maybe you're not a big, but look, compared to them, all the CS folks are rock stars, and we happen to have some rock stars. So it's like, that's the place where it kind of gets equalized across the university, and that's a useful thing. So.
No, I agree. I mean, what I am talking about is that you have to know what the process is. So you're not talking about yourself, but getting to know the review process and getting to understand from the chair's position, because chairs come and go and different chairs come in with different expectations. And so it's really important to understand what those expectations are. Right. And that's where I'm saying, you know, understanding the review process is critical. I do want to also say at our university, and probably at most, this is a comment brought up by Russ, is that sometimes you get reviews that may be as a student saying something negative. There's a process by which you can go in and just address it. And I think it's important to address it, not be defensive, but really just try to address it. Because sometimes faculty just say, you know, they just forget it. But, you know, you really should be looking at the reviews, addressing them, and what you're doing to comment on what they're saying. So I just saw something come in. Let me see. For some reason, I'm not going up. So on the chat, I just saw something coming in.
Yes, there was a question about grants, and that is Hala Mohammedan. I don't know if you wanted to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you.
But I'll go ahead and read it. And that is, I think the most difficult part of being a professor is to write grants and encourage people to fund your group. How to make this possible? And I think Russ has started some answers in the chat.
Yeah, I can say a little bit more if you don't want to read the chat or you know or what have you or just to kind of elaborate. I mean, yes, for me, I think this is perhaps the hardest part, or one of the harder parts, certainly, of the kind of day-to-day job. Because like, that's not why I got into this, to like ask people for money, right? Like, I got into this to kind of like, you know, I'm a systems person. I want to build and evaluate cool systems. I want to do it with other people that want to build and evaluate cool systems. So like my PhD students, my colleagues, you know, I want to work together with them to like build and evaluate cool systems. That's really what I want to do. The catch is, to build and evaluate cool systems, you need money. No way around it. So I look at the proposal writing and, you know, getting funding as a means to an end. If you want to do the cool research, you have to pay for it. And this is the way to pay for it. And, you know, if you can use that as motivation, hey, I really want to do this cool stuff, maybe that will give you some energy, some perspective, some motivation to go out there and write those proposals. The thing that keeps me awake at night more than anything else is just how am I gonna, am I gonna run out of money? Am I gonna be able to fund these students? I just took a student on. These grants last 3 years, right? Most NSF grants, right? Common is 3 years. Am I going to be able to get another grant to be able to fund this student so that they can finish their PhD, right? And that kind of is the thing that keeps me up at night. So I wish I could tell you that it's easy, but it's hard. You got to work at it. You can get better, and there are tips out there, and there are kind of workshops, that some folks I know run that help with that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that when you're writing larger proposals that you have a group of colleagues, whether they're in your university or outside the university, that are willing to look over your proposal and critique it, because that's something that I find very useful, because having a fresh pair of eyes that can see the things that I don't see, that are not being explained properly or not being promoted. So really build that network. This is why it's so important to have a network of colleagues, both outside, really outside the university, but within your department, so that you're all working with each other to put the best foot forward. We're really, I'm really do a lot of work in interdisciplinary research, and this is where it's really important that you understand whether that's valued at within your department. So maybe your chair values it, but if your colleagues are saying, no, we don't, you need to be sole author or sole PI or sole author on a paper, then, you will, it's not going to get you anywhere if you don't understand that. So really try to understand that you're at the right university, understand the context of the department to make sure that you are doing the right thing toward moving toward tenure or moving toward where you want to be at the end of 5 years.
I'll just put a plug in if I can for the teaching role, because that grant writing and grant receiving and having to write the reports is for me always the least pleasurable part of there's cheating and dealing with students cheaters. That's the worst part of my day ever. Then one step, like a hair step to the left of that, is dealing with grants and getting rejected and writing the thing and trying to advocate and writing the reports. Can't stand it. So this is part of the reason why folks who feel like me lean teaching, because there's less of that. I have two active, I'm happy to share my slide. I have 2 active research groups. Both of them are undergraduate only and require very little funding. I've gotten some funding here, some funding there, but they would persist even if I got 0 funding. So part of it is like I'm insulated against some of the insanity happening in Washington at our funding agencies by our current institution, because I've got a group of undergrads who want to get credit to do the research, and it's not the same. I can't get a big piece of equipment like Russ needs. I can't hire grad students because I don't have funding for them. When I don't have grants, I can't do that. But I have master students who work with me, and they pay for themselves by teaching. So I mostly am working on building tools for teaching. And so it makes sense for them to be able to TA that class, that they're using the tools. So it feeds in a virtuous cycle in what I'm doing, and it's impervious to funding, the whims of the funding agencies. So if you find yourself thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm dreading, or I've tried this and I'm really dreading that funding rat race, if you will, then come on over to the teaching side, because it's an opportunity to kind of still be able to do what you do at a smaller scale with undergrads, maybe for credit, and not have to have the big. Now again, if you want to do, it's hard to have computing engineering, right? Doing the same thing. If the thing I want to do wasn't CS ed, but Russ's thing, you'd have to have the money. You got to have the money to build these systems and buy the system and get the AWS time, whatever you need, right? There's things you need dollars for. But sometimes you don't, and sometimes you can be small scale and do some interesting things. And so if you find this, boy, I do not want to be part of that, come on over to that. Come on over to the teaching side. It's a great career. It's a great pathway, and doesn't have the expectations for grant writing and grant receiving as the research faculty do.
I think undergraduate research is something that I really think is so important. And you can do it a number of different ways, as Dan said. I think even teaching a research course is a way also to do that. I know that one of my colleagues, Naida Santiago at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, runs a very large research group, very productive, but it's all done through courses. And so would like to encourage you to think about that as well.
And they ring a bell when they get something submitted or accepted. They ring a bell. It's really
Oh,
cool.
yeah,
They
that's cool.
hey, we got it in, and they all
Yeah.
and they film it on social media. We got a paper accepted. We graduated something.
Yeah, they celebrate. It's
super fun.
wonderful, and I
Hip
think it
hop!
encourages
Ding, 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 ding,
everybody.
ding, ding. It's super fun.
Yeah,
Celebrate
and I
those things.
also want to say it's important to volunteer to be a reviewer, because then you get to know the process, you get to understand how the reviews are done, and you can't personalize it. It goes back to the teaching reviews. You have to put it down and think about what someone said. I've had big proposals rejected, and then, you know, after a year, say, okay, now I understand what they were saying. Resubmit, address those issues. It's the same as you do internally as you do externally. And then you'll get that. I mean, pay attention, because other people are seeing things that sometimes we don't see of ourselves. But while we're waiting for other questions to come in.
Valerie has her hand up, I think, also. I'm not sure.
Someone has their hand. Okay.
Valerie does.
Oh, Valerie. Yes, Valerie.
So
I see it.
thank you. Thanks, Dan. So I was wondering too, you noted the importance of grants to fund students with research, but if you can comment on other opportunities for funding students, such as teaching assistants, that's funded by the department, and sometimes with research you have other areas of funding for the students, and if you can comment on the teaching assistant and how much time for research, but it still keeps the student at the university.
Yeah. Go ahead, Russ.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. So there are other ways to fund the students. Yes, teaching assistant is certainly one way. So they're basically the way that teaching assistants. So many of you were TAs, right? I'm assuming. That's a useful mechanism to fund your students. So typically the expectation is that the student, at least my university, that you spend 20 hours of work, 20 hours a week on the teaching aspect of your teaching assistantship. So that's usually, you know, in our department, that usually ends up being about something like 40 to 50 students, 1 TA per about 40 or 50 students, something like that. And so that's office hours and, you know, grading and kind of just helping the students one-on-one. And hopefully you can keep it limited to 20 hours and then have that rest of the time to devote on research. So generally speaking, you're not going to be as research productive if you're a TA, if the student's a TA, but you can still make progress, and hopefully it doesn't get, you know, you can still hopefully make meaningful progress. Now, I've had some sort of nightmare experiences where a student TA'd a class for which they weren't really prepared, and that was a horrible experience for everyone, because the student was not productive in that, you know, that time period, and I don't think the students got a great experience either. So that's one thing to look out for. Make sure that there's the right match of the TA to the course, and that the faculty teaching the course is also reasonable about the expectations.
Yeah, there's another way, and that is one of the things that CASI does, the Computing Alliance of Hispanic Syrian Institutions, is that we really focus on going after fellowships, right? So there's a GRFP, highly competitive, but if you're working with undergraduates and they're presenting, writing papers with you, then they become really a good candidate to receive a GRFP. Don't have them do it on their own. Our model is to really provide them with we have workshops where we really work on how to put together a competitive packet right? And it requires a lot of review, a lot of feedback. The students have to understand that, but it's just not NSF. I mean, there's a lot of other opportunities to get fellowships, and many times, unless you have a very strong department or office within your university, students are not thinking about this. So as undergraduates, I really encourage you to work with your students and looking for these opportunities. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, that I just want to say, yes, fellowships, external fellowships in particular, great opportunity. So one of my students right now is funded on a NSF GRFP.
Yeah.
And that's great. And so he had the benefit of doing a lot of undergrad research before he joined my group. And then one of the things that we're trying to do is, and so contact me if you're interested, is we're trying to, like Ann said, it's useful to kind of build networks. So we're trying to kind of, I don't want to like I'm speaking for him, but like he would be happy to help people who are thinking about
Well, that would
applying.
be great. Yeah.
So I think it's useful to kind of do things like that. Trying to,
Because we want the students to hear from those who are successful, because it's very much like a career award. When you talk about what you plan to do with the GRFP and what your broader impacts are, it's really helpful to hear how the successful awardees, the types of things that they've done co-curricular that have really boosted their application. So yeah, I'd love to reach out to you on that. I would also like to say that at UTEP, we have a scholarship for service. So it's very similar to GRFP, pays a good amount of money to go into cybersecurity. But you don't have to go, you can go into an academic position, and you don't have to go into the National Security Agency or any type of agency like that, government agency that has cybersecurity. You can become a professor as well. I would also like to say that it's important that when you negotiate your position, that you ask for research assistance. So we provide research assistance for up to 3 years at our university. It depends on your university again, but you should ask for PhD or master's student or undergraduate students, because they're even can be very, very productive. Good undergraduate students can really help you with your research. And so don't just go after, if you're not going to an institution that has a PhD program, seek the undergraduate, seek the master's. But again, this is part of the negotiation process as you start applying for positions. So be thinking about all of these things, because the 3 years will give you enough time then to start becoming successful, securing your own money. So while we're waiting for other questions or other people.
I'm happy to chime in. I took 10 years to be a grad student, and I call it a graduate student. And that was because I taught for 6 years, 6 straight years I was teaching. So it was hard for me to find the time to do the research and to push myself toward my PhD and write and read and work on that path when I was teaching, because teaching was all consuming. And that was one of the reasons I knew that I wanted to be a teaching professor, because I was having so much fun. Like I was being paid for, Russ said, 20 hours a week. I probably was working 80. Like it was, if I, back in the day that you didn't report that as overwork, I just did it because I loved it. It was taking every weekend. It wasn't because my professor said, hey, you need to do 80 hours of work. I was doing it because that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to bring to that role. And I got some teaching awards as a TA for doing that. But the point is, I was loving it, spending every waking moment thinking about teaching, writing the exams. My professor kept giving me more responsibility. As I showed that I was ready for it, he would let me write the exam. My first year, I didn't do that. He wrote it and I commented on it. By the end, I was writing the exams and he'd comment on it. So he was really mentoring me to take this role as a professor, as a teaching professor, in the role of being his TA for so many years. So I wouldn't change it at all. I wouldn't change a thing about what I did, but I did know, just Russ was saying, when you have a grad student and they're TAing, you often lose some of the productivity that you had if they had a GSR, which is a research position, to do that. So you have to think about, well, I'm just going to have my grad students teach. Well, you're going to have less productivity of that team. Your horses can't run as fast because they're doing other things when they're doing that as well.
Right, but it's useful as a kind of the other thing is if you basically, I'm expecting to get these grants, but if I don't get the grants,
You got to back up.
I'm going to use this, I'm going to try to get TA support for these students if I don't get the grant. So, it's kind of it can be used as kind of like a plan B.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there is that's actually an interesting conversation because I'm the GSI. I'm the person in the department that's the role of liaison with the campus GSI. So when new rules come down, I'm the one who shares in the department. But the point of this is I'm the one who shares with each instructor. Each instructor gets to choose who they want for their teaching staff. And we have a history of hiring undergrads, and undergrads, at least in lower division classes, they know the class, they took the class, they're amazing. And so we have these amazing, but the reality is because of the funding challenges this fall and this spring, they said, Dan, the chairs pulled me out aside and said, Dan, make sure our instructors know we got a lot of people who don't have funding now, who were going to have funding, but because of some changes, don't have funding now. And so now we need to change the culture of instructors to not always lean first on undergrads, and a lot of times grads don't get chosen because it's up to, the level of management is up to each instructor. I can't, as the GSI coordinator, hire somebody. It's up to that instructor to make their team. And I wouldn't want somebody to rip that off of my hands. I want to be able to make my team. But if I'm making my team the way I did last year, which is all the top undergrads, and there's a pipeline, so they've been waiting for their job to roll into the next one. If I just keep looking at that pool of students and ignoring the new pool of this one name who I don't know, it's some random grad student of another faculty, and they're asking to add to my course, I'm usually going to say no because they didn't work there, they didn't do the work, they didn't do the thing, but now I have to say yes. So there's a little bit of changing the culture of our instructors to be able to bring in these grad students that need that funding. So anyway, there's a little bit of a side piece of it, which is my point of all saying that is that you're not guaranteed that your backup plan of your guy getting a GSI is going to come to fruition because the instructor makes the final call, not you as the advisor. The instructor does, and they may say no. And so again, we have to kind of change it to react. We got to support our colleagues who have grad students who don't have these roles. We got to be able to rethink the way we do this and not always prioritize undergrad. So the point is that's my role in doing it now. But you're not always guaranteed that your kid is going to get a funding for that semester. And then what do? Do they leave? Do they take a leave? I mean, it's really hard. Does the department maybe have a set of rainy day funds they can? So anyway, it's a tough conversation when you got a superstar grad student who doesn't end up getting funding that year because you don't have it and they don't get chosen for a GSI. I don't know what you do.
Well, there's a big shift right now, and I think
Exactly.
there's a lot of universities that are really hurting in this respect. So we all need to come together as a community and come up with solutions if we want to maintain a healthy graduate pipeline.
And I need to, it's a holistic system. It really is zero sum. If you're going to be hiring grad students who now don't have funding, thanks to the government being so tight with it, now these undergrads who are international students who were hoping and working their way to be a TA and not getting hired. So somebody's going to lose in this conversation. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect world. Yeah. Finite resources, they're winners and losers, and more grad student TAs means fewer undergrad TAs, and those folks were relying on it. And so they're the ones who are kind of suffering. So it's a hard call to watch those really people hard, who are, not brought. Like, really, I don't get, yes, you were amazing. You were going to be head TA, but you're not head TA. You don't even get a role. Like, that's really hard. So it's
you tough. Always have to think about, you want to maintain, I'm sure, in your position, the quality of the TAs that are working with our freshman, sophomore, sophomore students in particular, because we want to retain them and then have them really flourishing in the department. So.
And it's a heartbreaking decision to turn away this person who's a proven great TA for this unknown grad student you had to pull in because they're helping some. So it's a tough call. And some of them don't. Here's the thing. Here's what's even worse economically. What's even worse is they don't want a TA. They want to do research. So like, you're getting somebody who doesn't want to take the position. They're not prepared. Like, that's what Russ was saying. Like, this guy didn't work out. Yeah, that's what literally you're twisting my arm to bring people in who don't want to be there. They want to do research. That's what they came to Berkeley for. There's a TA requirement. So at least you have to TA once, but now they've done that already, but they got a TA again because they have no money. So it's a really tough call to bring in this person who's an unknown, who doesn't want to be there, for the person who does want to be there. It is amazing. So just want to say it's a tough call time right now in some of our situations.
Well, I'd like to do a little quick poll with our participants. How many are you planning to go into teaching? How many are you planning to go into a research position at a university? How about with the national lab? Can you just put it in the chat and we can see where you're
Yeah,
at?
that'd be good. There is another thing I forgot to mention, which is there
Oh,
are
yeah.
research only, these soft money positions at industry. And the nice thing about working in industry is the money isn't so soft. You're going to get a paycheck whether you bring grants in or not. Sometimes they don't have to bring
That's
any
true.
grants in. And so you don't get a grant. Nobody, NSF doesn't write a grant to Google. Google has enough money. So you're not writing grants. You're kind of applying and trying to argue that you're doing the right thing and you're publishing and you're some, and if you have resources, there's maybe some budget you get from that's internal to Google.
So
So
industry is an option, but
industry is an option
there
for the
has been a
research only
lot of
folks.
layoffs recently at Microsoft
That's
and
true
Google.
too.
I mean,
True.
there's a ripple
Yes,
effect
indeed.
here, but
And there
yeah, I
isn't
can
tenure.
see
There
in
isn't
chat.
tenure there. So there's
Yeah.
something about, like a lot of people don't mind the benefit package you get with the high salaries and the stock options you
Yeah.
get with the research things. But then 2 years later, you're on the street and you're looking for you're hustling for the next thing. You're always so like, and my wife is in tech. I have an experience. We were talking about your
Oh,
wife and your experience.
yeah.
My wife is it fascinating parallel, Russ. 25 years we were married a month ago. Isn't that fascinating? So we also had a
Oh,
25th
Wow.
anniversary.
That's amazing.
Summer
Congratulations.
2000. Thank you so much. Summer 2000.
Yeah.
Anyway, but she's in tech and she's moved several times. I think it's now 5 times. But every time her salary goes up, so maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. But sometimes it's you're off for 6 months and you get a new job, and it's amazing. So she's continued to bubble around, but it's a tough job, and I'm pleased that I'm not in that rat race, if you will. I don't get the salary she does, but it you're
Yeah.
you're moving around and you're always hustling. And by the way, networking in that world is so important because that's
Yes,
sometimes
absolutely.
because I'm a friendly person and I know people and I keep this social part of it. Someone lets me know in my social group that there's a new opportunity over here that might be good for me, and that actually works. So like that is super important. Who is so important in industry to be able to make these to jump and land on your feet to another role
Mhm.
and not be kind of there. So anyway, thank you for the Valerie for the
Well, while we're mentioning industry, one more thing. It's important if you try to like you do internships or other things and you make connections with folks in industry, try to maintain some of those connections as you take your faculty role as well, because that helps to kind of foster potentially some sort of collaboration with industry. There are all sorts of things that they have access to in industry that we do not have as academics.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of things that you can do when you're working with industry folks that you literally cannot do as an academic researcher on your own. And there are all sorts of opportunities that open up. So just trying to make sure that you make good connections with industry folks as you have those ready. Try to maintain those relationships.
And sometimes there's industry leaves. Well, you'll take a sabbatical and you go to Google. I mean, a lot of my computing systems people, they're all working at Google and Meta during their sabbaticals because it's like that's where they can actually get access to an infinite supply of resources and AWS cycles and all those things to do these cool things. So it's fun to see how many, but then you sometimes lose somebody. Then they don't come back. So then it gets good to them. It's like it got good to them, and then they decide to stay with it, and they don't. Then they become adjunct. That was the professor of the practice. Then they actually just transition to I'm still going to maintain an affiliation with Berkeley, but I'm really basically full time at Google or Meta and AI or something like that.
Well, before we leave, I'm determined to find out how many of you want to go to industry. So I'm going to say, raise your hand. Let's say, raise your hand if you plan to take an industry job. Let's start there. Give you a minute to raise your hand. No? How many of you plan to go into teaching position? Raise your hand.
They also may not know.
No?
Couple?
1, 2, 3.
Oh, all right.
Good. How about academia? As a research position.
Yeah, I hope we didn't scare too many people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hope we just sold it well. We didn't scare you away. This is
Well, let me just say that it was a pleasure I want to thank the panelists for all your great comments, and I hope all of you that attended got something out of this. And for Dan, I'll say, please consider teaching. It's so important. Go into research and teach and be a great teacher. Really appreciate your participation. I wish you all luck.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck.
Great. A wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank
Dan, I
you.
think we might have forgotten to circle back to Madison Thomas, who asked earlier. I don't know if you answered that,
Oh,
but
can you? Please go ahead and read that.
hi, Dan. Could you talk more about the UC system? Did you already?
Basically the UC is very similar. UC 10 campuses, the same as most other research R1 universities in how they have teaching positions and postdocs. There was a question about postdocs and CS education. I don't think postdocs are needed. I think Russ was saying theory is a kind of a common practice for that. I don't see it it has happened, but because there are fewer teaching related postdocs, and most CS education folks are on the teaching side, teaching track of that. I don't think that it's a required thing. I think sometimes you could have a person applying in a role from a postdoc, but it's not something that's expected. There are a lot of places you can come straight in, including Berkeley. You can come straight into our role. But again, we're going to ask for what your home run is. There's a little bit of that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of that. So if you've hit that, that's great. If you've done something that's impactful, you've written the paper that's, wow, look at the citations for that, then that's a big deal. But we want the best teachers and scholars, and so we're looking for both of those things. And so the teaching, in looking for that role, there's a whole nother panel for 90 minutes of like, what do you look for in the faculty process and the application process and that, but we're looking for great teachers as well as great scholars, and you don't necessarily have to be the best in the world. We just want somebody who's a really inspiring and a great colleague. So a lot of things.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Russ. And
Thanks,
Valerie.
everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Super
Thanks,
fun.
Thank you so much. It was great. And we have another panel at 12:30, so just in an hour, on work-life balance. So this was great about the academic ladder. So thank you, Anne, for leading the discussion, and Russ, and also Dan for great comments and feedback. So thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
You all.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Great to see you all.